Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. Mostly you can find me here in Colorado hanging out with my bighorn sheep buddies here, but from time to time I've been known to travel. And during my extensive consultation on the new Assassin's Creed Valhalla video game, I had the privilege of writing a lot of runes for that game, and I wanted to talk a little bit about those runes, the runic alphabet they're written in the Younger Futhark, and why that is in fact the authentic runic alphabet for the Viking Age. Now, I've talked in other videos about how the runes changed from the better known 24-letter Elder Futhark before the Viking Age into the 16-letter Younger Futhark right before the Viking Age. So I can turn you to some of those other videos for a little bit more information. But in this one, just to show you why this is the authentic set of runes to use in the Viking Age, I want to look at two interesting inscriptions from the Viking Age written in the Younger Futhark. So the first one is the rather famous Ribe skull fragment from Ribe, Denmark. Sweden has the lion's share of runic inscriptions, it seems like, especially in the Younger Futhark period, but a lot of the really interesting ones come from Denmark. Now on this skull, we see this inscription in the Younger Futhark. Ulfur och Odin och Hotur hjálp búri es viðar þeim virki och dvergunni búr. So notice that in the Younger Futhark we have a transition toward a less consistent, less efficient way of representing sounds, so that, for example, P and B are both written with one letter, the old rune for B, as we see in hjálp, help, and then búri, the dative of someone's name. What this says is wolf or ulver, and Odin, that's the god, usually written O-D-I-N in English, but the Old Norse spelling is long O-Ed-I-N-N. And a word that probably represents high Tyr, so possibly referring to the specific god named Tyr, although Tyr can also just be a generic word for a god, so high god or high Tyr specifically. Help búr against that pain and dwarf work, and then he states his name again, búr. So presumably this person is carving on this fragment of skull and by the means of what we call sympathetic magic, representing what you want to happen on something of a similar kind, hoping thereby to heal his own, perhaps, headache. And then pains of unexplained causes were often attributed to things like elves and dwarves in Old Norse and Old English. We also see some somewhat archaic spellings by the standards of textbook Old Norse, like you would find in most good introductions to Old Norse, such as a new introduction to Old Norse by Anthony Fawkes and Michael Barnes. Notice, for example, ok, the word and, is written as if it were spelled A-U-K, which we know is an older form of that word, but that spelling seems to continue long after the pronunciation actually goes from auk to ok. We also see the more archaic S, represented by just the letter S, for which or is. What exactly grammatically it's doing here is a little unclear. And viðar instead of just vid for against. Let's look at another longer inscription. Now the Ribe skull fragment inscription is pretty archaic. It has some pretty archaic forms. Notice that the H still looks like the H of Elder Futhark. It has not become the more star-like symbol in the Younger Futhark. But notice that the star-like symbol is still used for an A. So this is a very early transitional Younger Futhark inscription. Let's look at something a little bit closer to the events of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, an inscription from Klavenstrup, Denmark, which is from about 900 from the island of Finn. Here we read, Ragnhildr setti stein þansi aft alla solva góða vealiðs heiðverðan þegn. And then we repeat essentially the same thing. Ragnhildr setti stein þansi aft alla solva góða vealiðs heiðverðan þegn. Alla synir gorðu kumbul þausi aft fóður sinn og hans kona aft ver sinn, en soti reist rúnar þessi aft dróttin sinn, þór vigi þessi rúnar, at rati svo verði stein dansi eldi, eða aft annan dragi. So what are we reading here? Ragnhildr, a woman's name, set this stone, and here we see the words for this are actually not stabilized in form early on in the Viking Age. So Thansi and some of the other forms you're going to see with C added to the words for that are actually fairly common in these early Viking Age inscriptions. So Ragnhildr, the woman, set this stone after or in memory of Ali the Pale, priest of the shrines of the army or group of men, an honor-worthy Thegn. And Thegn, cognate with the archaic English word thane, is a term of respect we often see in these runic inscriptions from the Viking Age. And then the same thing is repeated. Ali's sons made this tomb after or in memory of their father, and his wife, who's also a subject here, she did it after or in memory of her husband, Versin. And Soti carved the runes, Reist Runar, these runes, Thessi Runar, in memory of his lord, Aftrotinsen. May Thor bless these runes, Thor Viki Thessi Runar. May that one become, Verdi So, a wanderer or outcast. Rati is what we expect is underneath this inscriptional form, Rita, which would be the dative or accusative of something like Rati, wanderer, outcast. So may he become an outcast, a wanderer, who turns Elti, this stone, Thansi Stein, or drags it in memory of another, Eda Dragi apt Anna. So a curse against someone who happens to disturb the stone. These are two real, legitimate Viking Age runic inscriptions of exactly the sort that I used in helping the team at Ubisoft Montreal design extra authentic, particularly correctly historical forms of runes for the Assassin's Creed Valhalla game. In fact, very often you can find specific runic inscriptions that I use from the Viking Age that underlie particular choices in how to spell particular words in the Assassin's Creed game. And the reason why I make this and I show you these particular inscriptions that I point out the exact times that they're coming from is because so often people challenge the use of Younger Futhark because all they know is Elder Futhark. But the only reason Elder Futhark has become so much better known than Younger Futhark is that actually it's a notionally easier system. You have one letter for one sound and one sound represented by one letter. Unlike the Younger Futhark system where you have to know things like you drop M's before B's if you're writing them, where T and D are written with the same letter, and O and U and all the other round vowels are written with the same letter. It's actually notionally easier to use Elder Futhark. Plus, Elder Futhark sounds kind of mysterious, and it's the one that all of the kind of occultist books that are so popular on Amazon use. But in fact, Younger Futhark is the runes of the Viking Age, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla has some of the most authentically written runes I've ever seen in a production. At least since the runes I did for Frozen. Right. Well, folks, the Bighorns and I are wishing you all the best from beautiful Colorado, and I hope you're all doing all right out there.